Welcome to Purpose 360. I'm Carol Cohn, and today we have a guest who's returning to the show. Someone that I admire so much. I've followed him in everything he writes, his podcasts, his books. It's Alan Murray, and he is got a new role. He's the founding president of the Wall Street. Alan Murray, he's the founding president of the Wall Street Journal Leadership Institute and the former CEO of Fortune Media. So it's been 3 years, but I'm so glad you're back. So welcome back to the show, Alan.
Great to be back with you, Carol. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I was trying to think about, what do I call Alan? Is he a CEO whisperer, a CEO listener? I mean, your entire career, you have spent interviewing CEOs, being with them at conferences, roundtables, et cetera. How might you describe your CEO leadership title?
Oh, so many ways to answer that question. Look, but I appreciate what you say. I'm a journalist, have been a journalist my whole life. Think of myself as a listener more than anything else. But I have had the good fortune over the last 2 decades to have extraordinary access to the CEOs of the largest organizations and being able to have conversations with them and get a clear sense of what they're thinking about and what's top of mind and what their anxieties are. And
there's a lot today.
Yeah, there's a lot there. But to your question about the Leadership Institute, I think the guiding motivation of the Wall Street Journal leadership is this sense that, everybody's talking about technology, everybody's investing in technology, companies are thinking about how AI is going to transform them. And that if you stop and think about it, or if you listen to CEOs, you pretty quickly come to the conclusion that the challenge they have is not a technology challenge. The technology is doing fine. It's a leadership challenge. It's how do they create organizations that can accept this rapid pace of change that they're seeing in technology, but not only in technology. I mean, look at what's happening at the public policy level in the US, where you do this wild swing from the Biden administration to the Trump administration and a complete change of policy, or what's happening in the world, the geopolitical threats that are having an enormous impact in business. So what we are trying to do is figure out how can we help people lead these large human-based organizations in a way that makes them resilient enough and strong enough and creative enough and courageous enough to deal with the challenges of the future.
That's fantastic. So was it your idea to create the Institute? Was it the Wall Street Journal? It's probably a combination, but I'm very curious about the backstory.
As you know, I left Fortune in April of last year for a number of reasons that we don't need to talk about. And I very quickly found myself in conversations with any number of organizations. There were probably 5 or 6 of them that wanted me to come and create something like this to address this problem of executive convening, helping executives deal with the pace at which new events were challenging them. So I was in a bunch of the conversations, but not with media organizations, with professional service organizations. But I had spent 20 years of my career at the Wall Street Journal. I love the Wall Street Journal. I ran the Washington bureau of the Wall Street Journal for a decade. It was kind of the in many ways the pinnacle of my young career. And I met with the CEO of Dow Jones, Almar Latour, and he said, "What are you thinking of doing?" And I told him about these conversations I was having. He said, "Well, don't do it for them. Come do it for us. Come home and do it here."
Come
and
home.
I thought, that sounds fun. And it was in a conversation between the two of us that we decided that creating a leadership institute. But just one more bit of the backstory, Carol. The building blocks, the foundational building blocks of the Leadership Institute are things I created when I was at the Wall Street Journal 15 years ago.
Wow.
The CEO Council, which has continued to this day, was something that I started in 2007 when I was at the Wall Street Journal. And then also the CFO, CIO, CMO
Right.
network, which were executive convening organizations, were the result of something we started back around 2009 or 2010. So it really is a homecoming. The building blocks are there, and my job now is to figure out how do we strengthen them, how do we
Mm-hmm.
provide more services to them, and how do we grow into other areas where there are communities of people trying to deal with this challenge of leading human-based organizations in a rapidly changing, unprecedented change, head-spinning change
Right.
world.
So, okay, so you have created various communities within the institute. So, can you first? I'd love to talk about a little the shape of the institute. Then I want to ask you a big question. What's on the mind of CEOs, which is a
Great.
big question. And then I want us to pivot to purpose. But what's in the institute?
Yeah, so let's do a quick look at the Institute. Right now, we have about 800 members.
Mm.
Close to half of those are in our CEO council. The
Mm.
other half are spread through the other councils, CFO, the tech council, which tends to be CIOs and chief technology officers. We have a CMO council. We think that 800 can be 2 or 3 times as large as that over the next couple of years, both by strengthening the existing councils, but by figuring out where we should build new ones. We launched a board of directors council. First summit was a month ago. It's a great organization, large company directors. We had our first meeting in Palm Beach, Florida. Great spirit and energy there. Lots of people you would know who came. And then in the spring, we're launching a chief people officer council, which
fabulous.
It's so central to many of the things I'm sure you and I are going to talk about on this podcast. Yeah. How you create that culture that is resilient enough and creative enough and courageous enough to deal with the change we're dealing with.
That is so needed because, you know, SHRM is, the organization for all the HR world. But I find when I'm trying to work with SHRM that, they're dealing with a lot of the operational issues. And I think to your point about the people issues and how they're going to truly the culture and how you're going to really humanize. How do you balance the humanity? I'll ask you this later, but the humanity with AI. So I want to go. You hold on. I'm gonna hold on that, but because that's a long conversation. Yeah. But what other? Can you give us a? You're also doing conferences for the institute. You're doing a podcast?
Well, each of these councils has events, summits. We also do dinners. We're also looking at other types of services we can provide, both kind of one-on-one connections, but also research that we can provide to them. We're doing some peer polling, elite polling, where we will, let's just take as an obvious example, when the tariff, what was it called? Liberation Day. When Liberation Day happened in April, we went to all our CEOs and said, what do you think the effect of this will be? And we got a very quick response. We were able to take that back to the CEOs within just a couple of days so they could see how their peers were thinking about it. So it's that notion of peer exchange, peer sharing, peer learning that is at the center of the Institute. And the basic premise is that most of the challenges that leaders are dealing with today are being thrown at them by the pace of change. So they're not things that they would have studied in school or can learn in school. And the best way to learn is to learn from the people who are on the front lines doing it. And so that's what we try to create at the Leadership Institute.
So it's very agile. It's fast in many ways. It's, one-to-one, and it's something you can really get insights and really apply them quickly.
That is our aspiration.
Right. Okay. And how is it going so far?
It's going great. Very different. At Fortune, I was the CEO. I had my own little organization, and people tended to do what I asked them to do. At the Wall Street Journal and Dow Jones, it's a much bigger company, much more matrixed organization, requires me to rely more on informal rather than formal power. But I think I've got a great team in place. I think everybody at the organization understands what we're trying to do, and we're moving ahead. So
Great.
it's working.
So
I'm very happy. I'm having a great time.
I knew you were having a great time. Yeah, I love the smile. So, what are CEOs saying right now? Can you
Yeah,
get? You don't have to say who unless you want to, but I
yeah.
really like. What's the conversation that's going on?
Well, I can talk about this. I have like many conversations, some of them off the record, some of them on the record. But we just recently had our CEO Council Summit that
Mhm.
kind of encapsulated what I've been hearing all year. And there are two things I would say. One
Mhm.
is I thought the obsession of the year would be what's happening in Washington, the policy changes, because they've been huge. I mean,
Mm.
tax, tariff, complete reversal of regulatory direction, um, uh, the transactional nature of the new administration. All of those things have created huge new uh, obstacles and opportunities for
Mhm.
CEOs. I
Okay.
thought that would be I thought that would be the leading topic of the year. I knew AI was on everyone's mind, but I thought it'd be overshadowed by policy. I was wrong. I mean, the AI opportunity and challenge is so huge
Mhm.
and has so captivated the minds of the CEOs that
Right.
it continuously rises above everything else. And that gets to the second thing, which you will appreciate and are very tuned into. Um, while the conversations I've been having start as conversations about technology, you get
Mhm.
about 15 minutes into them and you very quickly realize we're not talking about technology. We're talking about people, we're talking about culture, we're talking about leadership. Back to what I said at the outset, we're talking about how do you create an organization?
Mhm.
Most of the CEOs I talk to run really large companies. How do you get a big organization to adapt to
Right.
change the speed that
Mhm.
they have to adapt to right now? I mentioned the CEO summit we did in early December. Three speakers there, all of whom these conversations will all end up being published on my podcast. But you had John Stankey, who is the CEO of AT&T.
Mhm.
You had Mike Worth, who is the CEO of Chevron. Those are both 100-year-old companies, so lots of history there. And then Brian Nickel, CEO of
Mm.
Starbucks. And if you listen to all three conversations, the thing they are all struggling with is the culture issue, the
Right.
people, the how do I mean, both Sankey and Worth, I think, have been trying to tweak their culture because they feel the teams need to be better to take advantage of opportunities. In the case of Starbucks, it's how do you take a giant organization like that where 50% of the frontline staff turns over every year and
Mm.
create the kind of culture that creates those intimate moments
Right.
that Starbucks wants to create. So all fascinating conversations, all kind of started as being about technology, but at the end of the day, they're really about people and leadership, which is exactly what the Leadership Institute was created to talk about.
Ah, an idea that is now perfect for the times. So, perfect for the times. Let's pivot and go back a moment because you and I met because of Tomorrow's Capitalist, my search for the soul of business. And I would love to just revisit that a bit. And we're going to put those two podcasts in our show notes. How is the book doing? I must have bought, gosh, at least 100 copies because I gave them to everybody. But how's the book doing? And you could, if you could do a little headline of what's in the book, because I want all of our listeners to go buy it. It is absolutely, critical for someone who understands and desires culture and purpose. So, how is it
Yeah.
doing?
Well, thank you for that. I mean, the book served its purpose well, which was to get people focused on what was happening. Go back to your original question. The book came out of my listening and my attempt to understand what was on the minds of CEOs. And this is something I've been doing in different jobs in different forms for like 4 decades, Carol, a little over 4 decades. And what I discovered probably starting around 10 years ago, 12 years ago, was that CEOs were talking very differently about their jobs, dramatically differently about their jobs. It was much less of a top down, I need to tell people I need to set strategy and tell people what to do. And much more about, how do I create an environment that engages my people and gets them working together and gets them focused on the North Star? And I wanted to understand it. My first reaction, being a cynical journalist, was, oh, there's some new PR guru out there who's talking to all of them and telling them to talk differently about their jobs. But I started digging in and realized there were big fundamental changes in business that had happened over the course of decades that had led to this. And I'll give you the one fact that I think encapsulates the why of this change better than anything else. There was a study done maybe 7 or 8 years ago where they looked at the balance sheets of the Fortune 500 companies in the 1970s and compared it to the balance sheet today. And what you find was, if you look in the 1970s, more than 80% of the value on the balance sheet was attributed to physical stuff. Did you have manufacturing plants? Did you have the real estate? Did you have oil in the ground? Did you have inventory on the shelves? And then if you go speed forward and look at the balance sheets of the Fortune 500 today, more than 85% is what accountants refer to as intangibles. It has nothing to do with stuff. It has to do with connection to customers, brand loyalty, intellectual property, things that are much more closely tied to people. So you've gone from a world 50 years ago where the value was overwhelmingly tied to physical stuff, which is what you needed capital for. That was the heart of capitalism. You needed money to buy the stuff. Once you bought the stuff, you could create the value. To a world where value overwhelmingly is tied to people, talent. How do you get the right people and how do you engage them in a way that's going to unlock the value? That's a huge fundamental change that's happened over the course of a half a century. And I think what tomorrow's capitalist is about is how leadership has to change along with that. That the job of the leader is no longer, hey, I need to get the capital to buy the stuff so I can hire people and tell them what to do. It's more about, I need to create a purpose and a culture that will attract the best talent so I can create value. And that's what it's all about. Now, Carol, I'll say, I think one of the things that happened over that period was a lot of these CEOs were being very, very public about how they were approaching this human dimension of the job. And that got misinterpreted by a lot of people, including a lot of journalists, a lot of my friends and colleagues, as a political movement. That they were becoming woke, that they were, DEI was about playing footsie with, with Elizabeth Warren, or sustainability was because the left was pushing this and they were trying to make nice with the left. I think what the book shows is that's not what it was about at all. It was about a fundamental change in the levers that create value in business.
So your subtitle in the book says, "My Search for the Soul of Business."
Yeah.
Does business have a soul?
I think it does. I think what this change, look, management in the 20th century was all, if you think about it, if you study it, if you look at Frederick, what was his name? Frederick Taylor. If you look at the great management giants, Alfred Sloan, even up to Jack Welch of the 20th century, a lot of what they were doing was trying to make people into machines. because that's what you needed. If you're running a big production line of cars, you need people who act like machines. They have to do the same thing over and over and over again. They have to do it in a uniform way, and you have to set them up in a way that they do that. What's happened in the 21st century is the machines are taking care of themselves. Thank you very much. People don't have to be machines. Machines are doing a very good job at that. People have to be better people, and leaders have to engage them as humans. So it's really a humanization of the workforce that we're seeing happen here. And if organizations are really going to engage humans, they have to have a soul. They have to have a purpose. They have to have a North Star. They have to give people a sense that they're making an important contribution to society, not just give them orders on what to do next.
And I love when I read a lot of your writings about, what do we call this? Is it stakeholder capitalism? Is it conscious capitalism? Is it whatever capitalism? And you say your phrase I love, which is human-centered organizations. People are, people, you see people as the unlocks. So I love that. Our CEOs, you're talking to lots, are they seeing purpose still today? Are they seeing it's important? What are you hearing?
Yeah, it's such an interesting question, because without question, they are talking about it much less, right? And it's not just the Trump administration. There's social media campaigns. There are a whole bunch of reasons why it has become risky to talk publicly about
DE&I and ESG. There you go.
For instance. And so there's much less talk about it. But the best organizations haven't changed their focus on it. Because they realize, again, that's how you create value. I'll give you my favorite example.
Please.
A CEO who is stepping down at the end of January, Doug McMillon.
Yeah. Love Doug. Yeah.
Wonderful human being. He is as far away from a woke CEO as you can imagine, right? I mean, he was born in Arkansas, started loading trucks at Walmart. He serves red states. In fact, the irony is his company is everywhere except Manhattan and San Francisco because they've been kept from going in there. But I think the most amazing thing about Walmart over the 10 years that Doug has been leading it is, if you had asked me or anyone else in a position like mine 10 years ago, where would Walmart be in a decade, given the rise of Amazon and the ease of Amazon ordering, and any of us would have told you, oh, they're dead meat.
They're toast.
They'll be roadkill. They'll be over. Yeah. And they're not. In fact, quite the opposite. And if you sit down with Doug and say why, at a very high level, why, he will tell you, A, well, we had to get good at technology because they're really good at technology. So we're not going to be in this game if we aren't good at technology. But B, we're better at people. We do people better. And you look at the things that we don't have to dwell on Walmart, but you look at the things that Doug has done over the last decade to reinforce that. It's pretty remarkable.
Yeah. If you date back to, when did this start? And it was Katrina. And I'll never forget the photo. It was the New York Times, and you had all the trucks back to back to back. And Lee Scott said, I want to be like that more.
Yeah.
Which was incredible.
He said they had a meeting after all the great work they had done to help the people in Katrina. And he said, what if we felt like this every day? What would it mean to the company if we felt like this every day? And that was a pivotal moment. The culture at Walmart ties everything back to the founder, to Sam Walton. But it's not quite right. I mean, I'm pretty sure Sam Walton, for instance, thought of labor the same way he thought of every other input. It's like his job was to get the price of that labor down as low as he possibly could so he could sell his goods at the lowest possible price. And Doug McMillon explicitly changed that, went to the board and said, we have to change the way we think about how we pay our associates. We have to do a better job to make sure they can manage their lives. And we have to give them opportunities to advance. And he really made a profound change in the culture of the company. And he won't say that he went against Sam Walton, but it was very different. It's very different today than it was 20 years ago.
And he invested billions to change the culture, the systems, the operations, et cetera, to make them more human.
Yeah. So I think that's just, you can point to many other examples, but the reason I love that example is because nobody could say Doug McMillon was doing that because he was trying to please a bunch of liberals on the left. He was doing it because he thought that was the best way for his company to survive and make money.
So there's less conversation about purpose, or maybe it's in closed rooms.
That's right.
But are the conversations about people, culture, how am I going to be a human in this AI? Let's pivot to the AI world that we're in. That you call it maybe the fourth revolution is it? Is. Yeah. I want to take one question. Do you use AI? You must.
I do. Personally, I use it every day. I'm consulting chatbots all the time for personal and business reasons.
Do you want to be candid about, for business reasons, how you use it?
Oh, sure. I mean, earlier this year, we had an offsite and I was trying, I had a couple of very specific problems I wanted to address and was trying to think of exercises I could do with my leadership team that would help get to the right outcome. And I threw it it wasn't even a special leadership AI. It was just ChatGPT. I said, help me with this. And it came up, it suggested several very good exercises that were right on point. So
great.
Carol, you may know this, but between the time I left Fortune before I went to the Wall Street Journal, I had my hands tied by a non-compete for a few months. And I wasn't allowed to talk to anybody about this Leadership Institute that Almar Latour and I had talked about creating. And so the only conversations I could have were with LLMs, with ChatGPT and Gemini.
I hope you didn't try and marry one.
I did not try and marry one, but it was, I would
That's
put together
fascinating.
I would put together some plans and run my plans through there. Now, some people will tell you it's not a great idea because everything you're doing becomes part of the LLM. But I wasn't using proprietary information. I didn't have any access to proprietary information. I was just sort of thinking and using the LLMs as thought partners. And it was amazing. They were good.
Yeah. That's, as long as you didn't marry him, that's really good. Thank you for your candor.
I'm very happily married and have been for 41 years. So.
Well, congratulations. That's wonderful. You often talk. Let's turn to like the new culture of organizations in an AI-driven organization. Yeah. First of all, I'd love to know, what are your CEOs talking about, or are you talking with CHROs? Because I think it's fascinating that you're going to create that cohort in the Leadership Institute. So what are you talking about to balance this new world?
One of the fun things about the Wall Street Journal is right now we're organized by roles, which I think is limiting. And I'm actually trying to figure out ways to do cross-role convenings. But historically, we've been organized by roles. So over the course of the last year, I've met with the CEOs many times, but I've also met with the CFOs many times, and I've met with the chief technology officers many times. And the differences in how they are looking at AI was fascinating. The CEOs, the thing about the event of November 2022, when ChatGPT launched onto the scene, it was so accessible, it was so easy to use. And the CEOs very quickly understood this is going to transform my organization. Mm-hmm. So CEOs immediately got excited about it. That put the CIOs in kind of an interesting bind, because all of a sudden the CEO, who generally let the CIO or the chief technology officer or whoever do their thing, suddenly was in their office saying, why aren't we using this? Why aren't we using it more? Well, look at the potential here. This is good. Why don't you get on the case? And so all of a sudden, the CIOs and the CTOs are seeing this renewed interest from the CEO, and they're trying to respond, and they're buying chatbots for their employees. And then the CFOs started stepping in and saying, well, wait a minute, we're spending all this money on Microsoft Copilot, but I'm not seeing any return.
Right.
What are we getting for this investment? The bottom line doesn't seem to be moving. So there's that kind of triangle of interest that then led to kind of a frustration. It's like what I would hear from the CEOs is, wait, I know this is transformational. I know it is going to change my company in the future. We've done a lot, but I'm not seeing the return on my effort and investment. So that's been a big part of the conversation over the course of the year. At the end of the day, Carol, I mean, you can talk about strategies for getting, people will say, don't do 1,000 experiments, do a smaller number of experiments and very quickly decide what you want to focus on. All of that makes good sense. But really, at the end of the day, the core issue there is people, is culture. Look, this is a technology that on the one hand could unlock huge opportunities for business, but on the other hand, could displace huge numbers of employees.
Right.
Yeah. So I don't think anybody should be too surprised that there's some tension there between the CEO's desire to unlock those opportunities and the employee's desire to say, hey, wait a minute. I mean, do I really want to be embracing this technology that may replace me in a year or two? And that, of course, gets back to that's one of the reasons we created the Chief People Officer Council.
That's great.
Because you've got to figure out, how do you create a culture where your employees are willing to embrace and experiment and take advantage of this incredible technology wave without feeling like their jobs are on the line?
Absolutely. So you have said the most effective CEOs today are not the loudest voices in the room, but the ones who combine conviction with empathy. And you've talked about why empathy is really important. And you also talked about there's a higher premium on social skills. So can you talk about, because I think both of those are really illuminating to our listeners. So let's talk about empathy, because empathy was saying, oh, you're going to, take somebody into the room. No, it's not that at all.
Yeah. And that's why it was so interesting to listen to AT&T's John Stankey and Chevron's Mike Wirth. They were talking about exactly that point. Look, it gets back to that core change in the nature of leadership. If the way to be successful in business is to raise a lot of capital so you can buy a lot of plant and equipment and inventory and oil wells so that you can make a lot of money, then that, which is the way it worked in a simplified fashion 50 years ago, then obviously you're going to focus a lot on capital markets, because it's the capital markets who provide you the money you need to do all of that. Right. But if the way to make money is about engaging your employees so that they come to work and give their best talents so you can take advantage of those talents to create something valuable, then you've got to know what moves them, what they care about, what their hopes and opportunities are, and where they see the opportunities. And I frankly, this is it. This is one of the things that's interesting about having done this, or a version of this, for 4 decades. I'm pretty sure the first 2, maybe 2.5 of those decades, I never heard a CEO use the word empathy.
I bet not. Yes.
Never. And then during the pandemic, we did a CEO survey and asked an open text box question: how has your leadership changed during the pandemic? And the majority of answers, a little over 50% of answers, had the word empathy or empathetic in there. Wow. So this was a word that CEOs didn't use 2 decades ago, and most of them understand is critical to their leadership now. They've got to have they've got to be listening to their employees. They've got to be listening to their customers, because they have to understand how the world is changing so they can pursue the right policies to engage all of those people towards creating more value.
So you talk about a higher premium on social skills. So are you seeing organizations that are actually activating that on a daily basis?
Yeah, I think so. I think the best CEOs, it's choosing leaders. If the CEO's job is much less about telling people what to do than it used to be, and much more about making people feel excited about the mission and the purpose and engaging them and giving them a kind of a directional North Star, then CEOs have to practice a different kind of leadership. And it requires them to be great communicators. It requires them to be inspirational. They don't have to be, television stars, although sometimes that works too. They just have to have a way of understanding what motivates people and communicating that effectively to those people.
Yeah. Have you seen, I know you talked about Doug McMillon. Have you seen any other examples of the balancing of the humanity with technology?
Oh, I think there's so many examples that it's hard. It's hard to list them all.
Okay.
I have been. The short sellers will come after me for the comment I'm about to make, but
okay.
I've been a big fan of Mary Barra, who has led GM in a very different way than her predecessors by setting big, audacious goals and then giving her team freedom to pursue those goals. Now, the problem she has right now is one of those goals was, she said no emissions,
right?
No accidents, and what was the other? No emissions.
It was 0, 0, 0. I remember. Yeah.
What was the third?
No deaths. I think
maybe.
Yeah.
But let's focus on the emissions piece for a minute. That was a big, audacious goal.
Right.
It required a complete redirection of GM, and at the moment, it looks like that redirection went too far. They moved too fast towards electric vehicles, and the market isn't ready for them. Now, some of that is because you had a dramatic shift,
right,
in policy from Biden era policies supporting this to Trump era policies not supporting it. And that stuff happens. But the way she decided to lead by setting big goals for her people, I thought was really impressive. You can think of other examples who have done it more effectively. I think Delta Airlines is kind of an interesting question. Airlines are a horrible, difficult business, low margins, very hard to get it right. But Ed Bastian, he had the understanding that at the end of the day, what matters is the customer, and that the best way to appeal to the customer is to have employees who get that. And so he's done more to build up his employees and to empower his employees and to give them the connection that they need with the company than I think a lot of CEOs. So I think that's a great example. I don't know. As you know, the book is filled with interesting examples. Dan Schulman, who was CEO of PayPal and is now CEO of Verizon, is a fascinating example.
Right.
There are many of them out there. There's no shortage of them. And again, it's not because they're being political or listening to some new guru. It's because they understand this is how you create value in today's world. And it's different than how you created value 50 years ago. Yeah.
And you've also described that employees increasingly expect moral leadership from their companies. So that's probably an element of this humanization. What does moral leadership look like?
I think it's related to your earlier question about, do companies have a soul?
Mm-hmm.
If the goal here, if we are no longer in a world where the CEO can simply tell everybody what to do and expect them to do it,
Right.
but instead has to create a culture that engages people so they are motivated to do it. You can't ignore the moral element.
Yep. Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. No, that's fine. Can't. I like that comment. If here's a tough one. If you had to choose one factor that will most influence the next generation of businesses to really become humanized organization, a force for good, I'll give you two factors. There are one or two factors that you could say, you're in your communities of C leaders, and they turn to you, Alan. What do we need to do? What have you heard? What would you say?
Yeah, I think it's this. I think AI is going to be one step forward in exactly the conversation you and I are having, because the machines are going to take care of themselves even better than they did before. And what companies have to wrestle with is, how do we differentiate ourselves? We're all going to have great technology. I mean, that'll be table stakes. If you don't have great technology, you're dead. If you do have great technology, then you compete, but you're going to be competing against a lot of other people who have great technology. So I think the differentiator is, how do we get better? How do we get better use of talent, better people? I believe a lot of companies are thinking that way. I know, again, back to Walmart. I know Walmart is. It's mastering the people piece of this equation becomes even more important in an age of AI.
Great. And your chief people officer cohort is a great testament to that. I can't wait to see the podcasts and the articles that come out of that. I want to ask you a question. You have been at phenomenal organizations, Fortune, Time, Pew, the Wall Street Journal. What's the one most surprising thing that you've learned about the true soul of business, or about leadership? Maybe that would be an easier one for you. The most important thing you've learned about leadership from all of the places that you've had to be at in your storied career.
Wow.
Sorry.
That's a complicated question, because they were all very different organizations. It's just a continuing reinforcement of this point that the people part is hard. It is hard. There are very few people who know how to do it well, and it's going to be the core of winning the future. So I guess the one thing I would say is how stuck in the past most organizations, including the ones I've worked for, are, and maybe that's not surprising. That inertia is one of the great forces in our lives, and people tend to do things the way they've done things, and it's hard. Let me put it in a simpler way, because I've spent a lot of time in my management jobs fighting this for the last 2 decades. Culture is so strong and so persistent and so hard to change. And in some ways, the media world got hit with the consequences of technology sooner than most other industries. I mean, we were being disintermediated by Google starting in the mid 1990s, and the decline of the legacy media models started in 2000 and has continued at a solid pace since then. So we were early to feel the effects, and yet there's so many cases now, 20 years later, where I can still see legacy culture in media organizations that hasn't adapted to the reality that we've been living with for 2 decades. So all of which gets back to the bigger point, which is culture is sticky, culture is hard, and getting it right is critical, important, but difficult work. And that's why it was so interesting at our CEO Council Summit to hear the same thing is true at Chevron, the same thing is true at AT&T, that this is the great challenge of our times.
So is discovering an authentic purpose and living it. I mean, really bringing it to life in innovation and employee engagement and customer relations and community engagement. Is that one of the major ways that the culture may evolve?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Look, it's not a silver bullet. I mean, you can have a great purpose and a lousy culture in a terrible company. But I'm not sure the opposite is true. I'm not sure you can have a great company if you don't have your people aligned around a clear, inspiring, engaging
Inspiring.
purpose.
Right. I love that. As we begin to wind down, I had asked you in our previous conversation, what were the most pressing social issues of the day? And you said growing inequity and the lack of opportunity, DE&I, climate, taxes, CEO pay, voting rights, and China. A lot.
Huh. Huh. Yeah.
Yeah, but so what would you say today? What are the most pressing social issues of today that companies need to pay attention to?
Well, China is still clearly on the list. I spend most of my time talking to global companies, and they have grown up in a world of globalization, and they're now living in a world of that sometimes feels like deglobalization, and managing that is a pressing problem. I think most of them, but again, this has gone very quiet, but or maybe not most of them, many of them still understand that if you want to run your company for a long time, climate has to be pretty high on your agenda, because there are some changes that are going to have to happen. You can't be a successful company in a world on fire. So there are some changes that are going to have to happen in the long term. And even though it may not pay to talk about it right now in the current political climate, you still have to pay attention to it. And I can give you dozens of examples where that's happened. I think the disappointing thing to me is that DEI has really fallen off the agenda. And you and I have been talking for 30 minutes here about the importance of culture, but I don't think the DEI movement did its job in terms of convincing corporate leaders of the core value. I mean, you and I know at the end of the day, you have to, this gets back to empathy, frankly.
Right.
You can't be a great institution if you don't have your ear to the ground and you're listening to all kinds of information from all kinds of places and all kinds of people.
And reflect your customers.
Yeah, and those people have to reflect your customers. So I think that's a fundamental fact. But first of all, the DEI movement probably got a little too narrowly focused on some things and maybe went too far in some cases. And second, I don't think the business case for climate has been made pretty strongly within a lot of large companies, and it's been built into their strategy. I don't think we ever quite got there with DEI, and that's unfortunate. I think there's going to have to be a reframing of what diversity really means, because it's not just the color of your skin or your background or your socioeconomic status. It's also your political beliefs or there's so many things that contribute to creating a diverse workforce that's in the best position to innovate and take advantage of the future.
And thank you for that. We just conducted, which we released in December, our CEO Social Issues Action Tracker. And we did this right after the election because I wanted to see, and we asked the major question of the public: should companies do more to invest in society? And I was like terrified they were going to say absolutely not, go away, forget it. In 2024, the number was 46%. Dems leading at 66%, Republicans at 33%. Not surprising. This year, it is 51% they should do more, with Republicans up 27% year over year, which is interesting. I think there's a consensus of we can't count on government, and we have got to, and we're going to count on companies because they may be the thing that we trust most, or our employer, or our friends, to do more. The issue that we're hearing, and we listed lots, is mental health.
That's interesting. Yeah, I think that's been steadily rising since the pandemic on the corporate agenda. And it gets back to this issue of how do you best engage your people. It is something a lot of companies are paying more attention to, and probably because they have to.
So, two more questions. What advice would you give to young people who say, it's hard times, but I want to work for a company that has got a soul, or it's purposeful, it's real, it's authentic? What advice do you give to young people today, how they can get that job? Because it's really hard out there right now.
It's hard. It's hard. And look, you have to show some flexibility. I mean, if every young person follows their purpose and their purpose doesn't happen to meet the demands of business at the moment, somebody's going to be left out in the cold. So you have to show some flexibility, and you have to understand that you can't expect companies to share all your political beliefs if their customers and their employees don't share all your political beliefs. So I think there's been a lot of inflexibility among young people that has contributed to the problem. But look, at the end of the day, if I'm right, and I'm pretty sure I am right, companies need employees who are better people, who understand how to build loyalty among groups of people and get everybody aligned around a mission and get everybody moving forward in the same direction. What you referred to as social skills, that's what they need. There was a time not too long ago, Carol, when the cover of Business Week said, "Learn how to code." Everybody needs to learn how to code.
Right.
That advice no longer holds. I mean, the LLMs are going to do a pretty good job of basic coding. What everybody needs are people who can motivate, organize, who can ask the right questions, get people moving in a same direction around a common purpose. That's the challenge of the future, and that suggests a different approach for young people. It's probably not spend all your time learning how to code. Maybe spend some of your time studying philosophy or English, which is what I did, or history.
Interesting.
So that you have the judgment to help lead these organizations into the future.
And where should they learn those skills? Besides, they're out of school, it's their first or second job. Where should they learn those skills, those people skills, those collaboration skills?
What I hear, back to listening to CEOs, what I hear over and over again, you talked about empathy, but what I hear over and over again is just curiosity. You've got to get into the practice of continuous learning, reading. And this gets back to the Leadership Institute. One of the best ways, if you're a time-pressed executive and you don't have time to go back to school or take a 30-hour Coursera course or read a 1,000-word book, one of the best ways is just to talk to people who are doing it. Take every opportunity to learn from others, because it's moving so fast and you need to stay on top of it.
That's great. Unfortunately, we have to end this great conversation. But I always give the last word to my guest. So how would you like to just say that this is one in many future conversations we're going to have? I hope you say yes. So what final word would you like to say, Alan Murray?
Look, at the end of the day, I can cite all sorts of potential problems and concerns about where we're headed, but it's a very exciting time to be alive. We are going to remake the world over the course of the next couple of decades, and we need everybody to lean in and be a part of that. Try and understand where we're headed, try and understand the tools that are going to get us there, and try and make sure we use them for good purposes, not bad purposes. Technology is neither good nor bad. It all depends on how you use it.
That's great. Super. Well, you never disappoint, Alan Murray, from whenever I get to talk with you, read you, watch you, whatever. And it's been a wonderful conversation. So thank you so much. And we look forward to a great 2026. And, with your optimism is wonderful. So I love it.
And Carol, thank you for having me. Thank you for what you do. Keep pushing purpose, because it's important to how we get to the right place.
Thank you so much. I will.